All right, so how we'll do this, considering there's two of you there, basically offer your both thoughts and opinions. I'll pause. I'll always allow you the time to speak. I don't like to try and speak over you if I can help it. So take all the time you need. Obviously, anything poor or that you don't want at the end of the interview gets cut out anyway. And elements like that, just take it in your own stride. Hopefully it will feel natural. But first things first, I really appreciate you both taking the time to speak to me, particularly considering how life is and how busy real life can be outside of a band. So first things first, really simple. 2023, we barely got started, but how has it been treating you so far?
Lots of car problems.
Oh, my MOT is due in a week. Fingers crossed.
But other than that, it's been good.
Yeah.
2023 has been pretty great. When everything's pretty average for a few weeks, I guess it's been short, I guess. But real exciting. I think I'm very optimistic for the new year. 2022, usually I don't like think about things in terms of good years or bad years, but I would say 2022 kind of sucked for a lot of reasons. And so I feel pretty optimistic being 2 weeks in now.
Okay. It's considering the way the world's been the last couple of years, any time a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks goes by and everything's cool, we just appreciate and enjoy that.
Yeah, it's a big win.
Are you New Year's resolutions type people? And if so, did you make any?
Oh, I certainly didn't. I am real awesome already, so it would just be wasted effort, I think.
It's like a weekly resolution for me, not a yearly one.
I think that's a good way to look at it. I'm gonna pick that up.
No, fair enough, absolutely. So we have to first talk about just what Portal to the Goddamn Blood Dimension is exactly, because ultimately simplistic terms like band or project don't quite work when it comes to talking about you. So I want you to tell me in your words what you define Portal to the Goddamn Blood Dimension as.
Yeah, great question. I think it's always tough, especially when you see a band that I always sort of joke about, and because I love them, not because of anything negative, but like people talk about experimental music and then you look it up and it's like 2 guitars, a bass player, drums, and a singer, and you're like, oh man, whoa, experimental. But obviously that has no bearing on what the music sounds like, just maybe some of the tones. But yeah, as far as the band goes, I mean, it's really just it depends on who I'm talking to, but to the players, I sort of describe it as a learning experience, something that that we can all get together and sort of work on things that we think are interesting. One of the things for me is chamber music and sort of playing with the absence of those normal rock band tropes and figuring out ways to do those. We have a lot of quiet passages and passages that don't have pulses and things like that. And so for me, it's an experiment in watching other musicians and trying to breathe and be receptive and aware of what's going on around me and responding to that. And so I guess maybe an experiment in group learning is how I look at it. In a single sentence, that's what I'd maybe describe it as. I don't know about how you feel about it. And there is a lot that's very similar to being in a regular band, but it's slightly askew or on its side.
For me, so Portal to the Goddamn Blood Dimension started before I was in the band. And my other band would play shows with Blood Dimension, and the evolution of Blood Dimension brought about more band members, and those band members were in other bands that I would play shows with. And I always admired it. And then I don't know if you approached me or if I approached you.
I think it was a text thread with you, me, and Clark, and you were just like, yeah, we'll give it a try.
And yeah, I'd always looked up to it. I liked the songs that you were performing, and so those are the songs that are on the record.
Yeah, yeah, Rotten Fruit sort of came out around the time that we started accumulating people. Because for a long time it was just myself. It started
Mm,
out as I was playing in a post metal band and a few other bands, actually a lot of bands. I had a few years where I was overloading myself a little bit, doing like the one practice every night, not well, basing most of my life around playing in bands. And the one thing that would happen is that, you know, you play in six bands and then a band you like is coming to town and you want to play that show, but nobody in any of the band can. So I was like, well, I need something to do so that when uh this band I really like comes to town and nobody can play, I can at least play the show. And you know, there was plenty of venues and space for all of that at the time. And that's sort of where it started. Rather than a conscious effort to make a band, it was an excuse to go play more concerts.
it's never about never the worst reason to get something started.
Yeah, people have done worse for worse reasons for sure, but you know, I guess maybe it was a vain reason, a little bit of vanity, but it was also, you know, just awful on and off for little bits. One of the sort of threads that we followed for a long time was the idea of never doing the same thing twice.
Right.
So for a long time, Clark, who was sort of the well, I'm if I remember history correctly, we had actually I think they're from London, Dragged into Sunlight.
Hmm.
Um, we had them come through with Primitive Man and um Cult Leader and somebody else. And I was like, you know what, this is a bigger show than I normally would do as a single person. So I had Clark and another friend from a band called Sonnets, Kale, come and do vocals for me while I did an awful harsh noise set. You know, it was one of those things where it was like uh, I didn't book the show, some big promoter did, and somehow snuck on the bill, and you know, everybody turned up to see a really great show, and they spent the first 30 minutes outside taking up smoking to avoid my set, which I thought was a lot of fun. But yeah, since then we'd sort of tried to um write and perform a different piece every single night, which meant that Clark and I would meet up 15 minutes before we played, and I'd be like, "All right, I'm sort of thinking about doing this, this, and this. You got some words?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, I've got this, and so maybe I'll switch these things up." And we'd meet in the, you know, backstage beforehand and come up with what we were going to do that night, and then go and do it. And so you know, that sort of one thing led to another, and eventually we were just like, man, that thing we did last night was cool as hell.
Mm.
uh we should write it down before we forget it. And you know, then eventually it was like, well, what if we didn't improv every night, because it turns out that like we really like some of these things, and they started getting too precious to sort of give up immediately, which, you know, changes things. It changes the way you approach things a lot. But it was like really really again, just a weird uh I guess lack of any sort of real framework. We just have been you know, under the radar enough to do whatever we want without a lot of criticism for it.
When you came along then, Jordan, did you find it in a much more ordered state?
There was two songs written,
Mm. Okay.
and like I had been watching them do the improv set
Yep.
over and over again. I would go to the shows and be like, man, that's so cool. I love that you guys just do improv. And then I heard them start repeating songs. I was like, oh, I really like that song.
Ah.
And then they brought me in on drums, and um, I thought, you know what would be fun with this is to just be as minimal as possible. And so it's just like, I guess it's not as minimal as possible, but like less drums than I normally use, just like a kick, snare, and a ride. And I try to keep it that small at every show. And I think that forces me to be more creative and more attentive to what the song needs or doesn't need. I'm also like, I've been obsessed with noise since I was a kid, and I didn't know that noise was a genre that people just did.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, that part of that song sounds weird. What's that? And so every now and again, they let me just like pull out my pedals and just like make noise. Well, they let me do that whenever I want.
Yeah.
Whenever I see it's fit.
Noise rock, noise metal is its own genre. It can often be an incredible genre, even if it's a challenge in itself. That's often the fun of that, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think another part of the appeal was like I came into it knowing that the songs held up just by themselves, but there was still a lot of space for me to be able to fill in. And so, they trusted me enough to just like let me go at it. And so it's been super cool having that freedom. And like with the new stuff, it's more of I feel like I'm more involved in the writing process because we've wrote it with all of us in it.
Yeah, which is real exciting. I think the personalities come through a bit more.
Okay.
And it is I do really just to one thing that Jordan mentioned that I always love is that sort of parameterization of music, where Jordan made that conscious decision of, I'm a drummer, I have this drum kit, but for this I want to really put limits on what gear I'm using, you know, and you know, I think that that's sort of something that we all do, whether consciously or subconsciously. You know, I want to write a song that's in the key of B is a simple version of that, and to do the same thing with the equipment you use is sort of very on brand for us, you know, where it's like, here's what we want to do, and let's just try and tweak it in a way that we find satisfying and gets us results that maybe we wouldn't find without that set of limitations.
I have a story to kick in on this a little bit. Before I was in the band, there's a local record shop that's awesome called Diabolical Records. They're
very awesome.
They're, in my opinion, they're the best record shop in town, and they used to
America.
In America, in the world,
universe, I might say,
from here to Pluto. And they would do this thing called Bandemonium, where they would put everyone that wanted to be in it would throw their names in a hat, and then the owners would pull out like 5 or 6 names, and you're in a band with those people for 2 weeks, and you have to write a 10 to 15 minute long set.
Oh, wow.
Super fun.
Oh, it's so fun. And it's like a who's who of Salt Lake City music. You know, the people involved are all, because the record store is so cool, everybody who goes there is cool, and everybody who plays there. I mean, they used to do shows like 6 nights a week. And so everybody there is like a top-notch musician, and sometimes you get people who aren't musicians but are just cool and you know them, and so the breakdown of those groups is just incredible. But
we got put into a band together.
Oh yeah.
With Brooke, your wife.
Yeah, wasn't my wife at the time, but ultimately wound up being my wife because of this, I'm sure.
And we all showed up with instruments. I think it was like cello, harp, piano.
We had Jeremy on drum machines.
I was on drum machines and like a smaller
keyboard.
He
doing keyboards?
Jeremy was doing just the full keyboard.
Okay.
But a long time ago, I heard about this card game that Brian Eno came up with, where it sets parameters to help you write music. And I was like, I didn't remember the rules, but I wanted to come up with something 5 minutes before we met up. So I took a deck of cards and I wrote like a list of notes and chords, and we just kind of like pulled from the deck randomly to like come up with a melody until we landed on a chord. And we tried to see if we could make that melody fit inside of that chord, and made some like sections of chord progressions that, like, from there we could choose the ones we liked and didn't like, and ended up writing our set from that. But that's like another example of like setting parameters and putting limitations on what you're doing as a means of creating.
Yeah, that was super fun. What a interesting mix of instruments. Brooke, obviously we don't have a harp here. You walked through the house on the way in. But her sister still has that harp. It'd be sweet to get that over here and do a little family band one of these days.
I mean, the open and eclectic nature of obviously your musical abilities and what you've been experiencing over by the sound of it, the last decade or so, maybe even longer, you correct me if I'm wrong there, is incredible. But I have to ask them, when it came to the direction that Portal to the Goddamn Blood Dimension went on, the challenges that come with creating and doing what you do, what were some of them and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge that we always face is scheduling. I mean, I work 9 to 5-ish. Clark's the same way. Jordan is sort of a show o'clock. Whenever there's a concert, that's sort of when Jordan works. And we have a lot of the people that we've worked with over the years have, extremely disparate schedules. So I mean, and I feel like that's the same even if we all had the same schedule. We all have events and families and friends and all of these things. Luckily a lot of us know each other from outside of music as well, so there is a little bit of a cross-pollination in all of our lives, but scheduling is always the toughest part. I think that's whether you want to play pickup basketball with your friends or if you want to be in a band. And that's a huge challenge. I mean, the other challenges that we could call out, I suppose, are probably around, just the very nature of being in spaces that are designed for, or maybe not designed or consciously designed in any sort of way, but we're not a typical rock band. We don't fit on some stages. We don't fit with some soundboards and sound people, and so there's always that. If you're not familiar with a location or the sound guy that night, you can really throw people for a loop when you show up, and it's like, all right, cool. What do you need on from me? And it's like, well, we've got clarinet, we got cello, how many DI boxes you got back there? You ever EQ'd a violin live? So that's sometimes a challenge, but overall I think a lot of these things are just experience games. I think at this point we've done pretty well with figuring out what's necessary and what's not necessary from a venue, and we're not playing such big places that we really need to lean so heavily on the space and the staff there to make it fun and make it sound good. I think we've gotten to a point where if we played with just the stuff we have on stage, we'd probably be able to make it work. So challenge overcome. I think scheduling is always just going to be the hardest part about being in any group with more than 2 people.
Do you have a reputation when the venues then, and have the sound guys going, oh god damn it, it's them again?
Yeah, luckily at least in Salt Lake City, I think we've got pretty good. The nice thing is we tip well, and we're relatively polite. So I think for the most part, everybody that does sound now too, we've sort of come up with, so they know what they're getting in for, and appreciate us as people enough to at least not say it to our face.
Well, you nailed one of the things that can get you very far in life. We're not a tipping culture in the UK, of course, but we know how important it is in the US. But simply get far in life by being polite.
I think that's something funny that people bring up a lot with you know, and by no means are we breaking the top 100 anytime soon or in this lifetime. But you know, you see it on the internet, you see it with new musicians and things like that, and it's like, how do bands get big, you know, especially
Mm.
like extreme music and things like that. And there's this like impression that there's a certain element of nepotism and luck. And it's like, no, it's don't be an asshole and work real hard and always be networking, you know, and by that I mean, you know, talk to people you think that are interesting, talk to people who play the same instrument as you, use the opportunity of meeting somebody that you really admire as a chance to not just say hello and sort of fade back into the woodwork, you know, have real conversations with people and uh, be valuable contributors to those conversations. And that's sort of what, you know, I think that's the same with any industry is networking is extremely important, but you know, being there and being uh, polite and courteous and interesting, by being genuine, you know, that's the biggest thing that you can sort of do to um you know make your way in the world, whatever it is you're trying to do. And you know, that's why sound guys don't hate us so much.
I mean, of course, you are pushing against a bit of a wave here as well. Bear in mind that you know, you can work as hard as you want, but with the flood of music, the way social media is these days, and all those aspects can make it incredibly difficult to get your head above the parapet, as it were, to be noticed. Is that an aspect? And I'm talking about social media and the always on and the connecting with a fan base and that you think you're good at, and is it something you enjoy?
Ooh, are we good at social media?
I I just repost stuff. None of my social media has anything to do with my music.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of singing and weird instruments. I don't know. I think that's like the coolest thing about the 21st century. I love the, you know, maybe it's a throwback to like really archaic music and the idea that like,
Mm.
you know, before the internet or even before you know, electric instruments or things like that, it's your entertainment options were so localized. You know, it's like, all right, so we got like Jeff and Mary, and they play music in our town. They're the minstrels, and so that's the music we listen to. And I almost feel like because there's so much music, we're you can get forced back into that. There's sort of like regional dialects that people adopt. You know, it's these are
Mm.
the bands that we play with. This is the scene that we're a part of. And I mean, one of the things that I always tell people when they ask about my tastes in music are like, what's your favorite? You know, that's a pretty standard question. Do you like country music? Do
Of
you like
course.
whatever? And I always tell people that my favorite genre of music is music from Salt Lake City because and that's the music that I listen to. Those are the bands that I see, and obviously there's I mean I listen to a lot of music. There's a lot of international influence on what I listen to, and maybe I take that to how I write and things like that. But when it comes down to it, I do feel like there's um, I personally love the fact that there's so much music out there, but I love the fact that it's sort of for me it forced me back into this sort of regional music community that
Mm.
that we all sort of play off of each other. We all you know develop in the same way, and it feels like a really cool thing like that it makes in this sort of sea of music everywhere, it sort of makes it a little intimate when you can have that support system of just awesome people around you. I mean, you know, not to um, go too far into uh, like our region, but I mean, just not only do we have huge international acts, but we've
Yeah.
got incredible you know acts that probably like us will poke our head out here and there and maybe not be as internationally or nationally or even regionally notable outside of our particular music scene. I mean, we have Cult Leader here. We had Sabrosa for years and years, who are now the Odolith, who are also incredible. there's just a lot of really great music. I think the Osmonds were from here. Is that right?
They were further south. They were in Orem.
Orem, but pretty close.
Right.
You know, and it's cool to sort of have that run the gamut from you know, notable to unnotable, all gelling together and being in the same spaces and just really being a community of musicians playing music that I prefer to any other music in the world.
I think part of what draws me to like listening to music in my region, like outside of the concerts, just like putting them on at home, is you go and see all these local bands and you have a good experience, and part of reliving that experience is listening to the music when you're at home. And like you said, there's like there's a huge scene, and not just Salt Lake City, but like most towns have a music scene going on where people feed off of each other and they write music based off of what they've seen at local shows. Every now and again, one of those bands will get huge. That's where you get like, oh, this band's from so-and-so, they're groundbreaking, and like, I've never heard anything like it. And chances are that they're like part of a big scene that was going on. They're like one of many bands that sounded like that, you know?
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, actually, that's not true. I was going to say, unfortunately, there's not like a parallel to us, but there's another great band from Salt Lake City called Hoofless that's very similar aesthetic, and we've known them forever. I remember when they formed as a band. I might have even done sound for them the first time they ever played.
Really?
Yeah, we used to have a terrible, awful place called Bert's Tiki Lounge that
you did sound at Bert's?
Yeah, I did sound at Bert's for a few years. I think it started when a sound guy didn't show up, and I was there, and they were like, "You know how to work this?" And I was like, "Yeah, you just push the buttons and slide the faders." And they're like, "We're not all scientists here, buddy. Just get up on behind the board." And that's how I actually started bartending there too. I think I was doing sound, and they're like, "Where the hell's the bartender?" And I was like, "All right, you just push buttons and slide the faders." And they're like, "That's good enough. Have some beers while you're back there." Yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right. There is this sort of constant feeding off of each other, and you know, chances are when you see that band that's really scratching that itch, there's somebody else that they played a dozen shows with in a warehouse someplace that's real similar and really probably also scratches that itch, which is awesome. I think that's so cool. And that is like also something that's cool about going on tours and having people tour through and you know, being open and polite and interested, is that you find those things. You know, it's like, oh, cool, yeah, I know you through so-and-so. And I really want to come and check out your band because I really like that other band that told me about you. You know, there's that I don't know, there's probably a sports reference there, like the depth of the bench. It's like a baseball thing, like or you know, it doesn't matter. I feel like I
don't know much about sports.
I know. It's obviously I do. But you know, I think that there's a lot of depth to you know, the music scene everywhere, and you know, a little digging and you can always find what you want.
The importance of word of mouth still can't be understated still, even in 2022, 2023. You know, you talk about your local scene and the connections that are built there. It is the same in the UK. You know, you can go wide ranging with UK based bands, but simply if you're here, we break it down into territories just as much as you do. Oh, we have the Manchester scene, the London scene, the South Coast scene, and all this stuff just like that. And for the most part, everybody gets along for the most part. Yeah.
It is nice. I think, yeah, we've been very fortunate too. I think, you know, part of that is everybody who plays music just tends to be interesting, you know, that, and not to everybody. I mean, they're interesting to me because I also do it, and sort of just like that failed sports reference I just made, like, you know, the our interests are the same, the people we know are the same, the places we go are the same, and so it's really easy to get along with those people because of that sort of shared experience.
And ultimately, the goal for all of you, all of us, everyone in a band and playing music around the world, the goal is the same: to just make music, not necessarily to get big, make money and all that, but ultimately make music and hopefully connect with some people.
Exactly. It's sort of like a throwing your hands up as a certain type of person and waving to people, you know, and the right people wave back. It's like a smoke signal to other musicians and other music fans and other, you know, maybe people who have interests that are maybe outside of what the mainstream is.
I feel like when someone's like playing music locally and their only goal is to make money, hey, that's
Wow.
a poor decision you've made. Like, good luck with that. And B, like, I can see right through that bullshit, and it's like, I don't. It doesn't interest me.
Yeah,
Like, it's, I don't know. That's someone else can listen to that music.
it is interesting because every once in a while you see those people where it's like it's their first show and uh uh they've skipped those steps and then you never sort of see them again. You know, where they're trying to maybe be bigger than their britches, and you know, those people tend to maybe not have a good idea, and they decide to do something else with their lives.
Or maybe we've just been doing it so long that we gave up on those.
Yeah, I think you know, I was never that into video games or cars or sports, or I like all of those things just fine, I suppose, except for maybe cars. But you know, it's always just been like that's what you do with your time. Like you gotta waste your time and money somehow. So it might as well be changing the strings on your cello. It might as well be seeing how loud your amp gets before it makes a weird noise. You know, it's really, you know, just the human condition. You're here, you gotta fill your time, or else you know, what you're just sitting there, I guess.
Regardless of all of that, a little bit of money wouldn't do no harm to help you on your ride. You can do
Oh,
that,
always.
ladies
Yeah,
and
we
gentlemen.
put
You can
the
do that
more
by
teaching.
simply picking up the album Rotten Fruit Regular Orchard, which of course is available now. I have to ask, this record has had a profound effect on plenty of people, us included. That's no secret. Did you have any expectations on what the record was capable at the time?
No, I mean, I didn't.
I mean, I think it moved people locally, and they would express that to us, and I felt just the need to like have it in a form that was outside of me playing it, so I could listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great feeling, you know, it's like taking a snapshot, you know, it's here's what you go on vacation, you take a snapshot and you're like, here's me at the beach. I had a really great time. And same thing with a recording, you know, it's like, this is what we sounded like when we recorded this record with our friends. We were having a great time. And, you know, we wanted to remember that. We wanted to remember all the time we spent together, which is sort of how I look at recordings. But at the same time, my expectations were very small. It was, in fact, when we originally did the digital release, it was during the pandemic, and we had recorded it beforehand for the most part. We did the mixing and mastering after everything sort of went into lockdown here. or shutdown. I don't know what the right term is, but we had all sort of been alone in our rooms for months at this time, and I finally had all the pieces, all the master tracks, and all the artwork and everything, and I think it was a regular old afternoon. I was bored out of my mind, and I just posted on the internet and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna release this album." Um, I did a random number generator on my computer. I was like, all right, today plus X amount of days. And it turned out it was like a Tuesday, the next Tuesday or something like that. And so I posted and said, hey, the computer gods have said we're releasing this album Tuesday. And then I just released it. There wasn't any real build up to it. It was, it was, again, just, it wasn't like I might have posted it to our Facebook page or something like that, but it was mostly just to my friends on my personal page. And that was sort of the intention, was to just make music for ourselves and make music for our friends. And somebody actually shortly thereafter, a good friend was like asking about it and just saying, hey, did you reach a lot of people? What happened there? And I was like, no, I feel like we reached all the right people, though.
Right.
Like the people who were giving us feedback were just people that I respected, people that I loved. And that was just a really great feeling. And one thing led to another, and I don't even actually what is it? Heavy Blog is Heavy. They were sort of probably instrumental in most people finding the album. I don't know how they found it. But they did a little write-up on us, and then shortly thereafter, Charlene from Ripcord Records, who's just been a huge supporter since she found us, and it's been so awesome. Interacting with her has been great, and she's been really helpful in getting people to hear about us, and that led to a tape release, and ultimately to the vinyl release that she did in conjunction with I Corrupt, Ingo over in Germany, and No Funeral in Canada. So yeah, I mean, I feel like our expectations were really low. We spent a lot of time on it. It's one of those things that doesn't come together quickly. And because of that, it was very precious to me and everybody else in the band. So I felt very guarded about it. I didn't want to be like setting expectations on what kind of legs it would grow and where it would go. Mostly because I've also played in bands for a really long time, and I know that, like you said, I mean, there's so much music out there, and if you don't hear band X, there's band Y that's doing the same thing or a similar thing that you can listen to and be just as satisfied. And so, I didn't, my expectations were extremely low. But, I think they were realistic. I think it was like, what, my friends are going to hear this. The people that like our songs are going to enjoy having a copy to listen to at their house. And it definitely exceeded my expectations. I think, we were talking about local scenes and community, and I feel like our community grew much bigger because of that. Like, not our local community, but my personal community. The people I consider part of my personal community grew, and includes people from Germany now, and London, and Glasgow, and all these places that I feel very connected to, people that I wouldn't have been able to feel connected to before that. So I mean, for me, it was a huge success. I think I learned a lot from the experience, and I also feel like it's been great. It's sort of like I said, it's like sending up smoke signals, and I found more people to be part of that community in so doing with this album, which feels really great. And I think we're going to take that and hopefully run with it. I think you mentioned in your we watched the year-end breakdown, and I think you said something along the lines of, even if they never do anything else because of the nature of being in a collective, which you know, it's one of those things we sort of dance on that precarious line of like exploding all the time just because we've got so many moving parts. You know, but I think one of the things that came from it is that sort of like doubling down of you know what, it makes it harder to be ambivalent or maybe not as passionate. You know, the fact that uh people have been so welcoming of us into their lives makes me want to do it more and makes me sort of more tenacious to continue pursuing this project. So that's been really cool. I mean, the response has just been overwhelmingly like warm. You know, the everybody's so kind, and you know, I think also part of that is the type of music and the people who gravitate towards that music is you know, I think that there's plenty of reasons you could poke holes in what we do or how we do it, and because of, like I said, you know, we might not have reached the most people, but we reached the best people, and so you know, we really have been fortunate in that respect, and it's definitely felt really, really inspiring.
How about you, Jordan? Did you think about its capabilities?
Say that one more time.
The record's
The record's
capabilities.
capabilities.
Hmm.
I've, like I said, like I recognize those songs as like the songs that you started to repeat before I even joined the band.
Yep.
So I had, they were kind of on a, those songs were kind of on a pedestal for me already.
Right.
I looked up to them, and so being a part of it was super awesome. And I wasn't even, I never expected it to go like international. Like even just like getting some tapes pressed was a big deal to me.
Yeah,
Like,
somebody else doing that as opposed to us having to do
yeah,
it.
yeah. It's like, oh, that's like that means a lot to me. It's like it, and like I don't know. I love that it's getting this recognition, and I also feel like if it didn't, it wouldn't change the way we're going about it.
Okay.
Just like regardless of how big this gets, like we're all going to be making music until we die. It's like at this point, it's not like a job that we're seeking or a career that we're seeking. It's an itch that I can't itch enough. It's an obsession. It's like it's another limb to me. It's like if I didn't have the option to make music in my life, I would be lost. So it's always going to be there, and I love that it's getting the attention that it's getting.
I'm glad to hear that, because I want to take this moment to give a shout out really to the person that really has championed you from our side. What you were quoting there wasn't me. It was actually Brendan.
Right.
Yes, who is the person that first discovered you and has pushed them into my ears, pushed you guys into my ears over the year. Put it this way, I got a Christmas present from him this year. It was your vinyl. It's been all him, and it's been a fantastic experience getting to know you guys through him. I even asked him, I said, Brendan, you should do this interview. But Brendan doesn't do interviews, unfortunately. It is me. So that's why he's not
philosophy, though.
But he has been the real drive, and it has been a great experience, as you would have seen from the videos, him forcing. That's how it works sometimes in family. He's my brother. So he's going to force me sometimes listen to music that I wouldn't normally listen to. And through that, I find things I adore as well. So he'll be glad to hear that what you guys been saying, which brings us to kind of now, because this, Rotten Fruit Regular Orchard was dead. And it's kind of, as we enter 2023, and interesting to kind of what's going on in the camp now, in the Portal of the Goddamn Blood Dimension camp right now. And I realize ultimately you're not, or may not want to, or be able to talk about certain things, but is there anything you can kind of tell us about the future?
Yeah, I think, the one thing that, the Clark, who isn't here today because he's pukey, is the impression I got, is prolific. Clark writes constantly. When he shows up, we I mentioned maybe before we were doing the interview, Clark and I used to play in a band, and you know, me and the guitarist, or the two guitarists and the bassist, or whoever was working on a song, would come to the band and be like, "I got a new song," and Clark would be like, "Okay," pull out his notebook, flip a few pages, and he's like, "I think I got something that would work." And he'd be good to go that first day. He's like, "I got the lyrics already." And during the pandemic, him and uh, I was like, "Here, we're gonna do this album next," and he was like, "Cool, I wrote it," and I was like, "Just kidding, we're gonna do this one next." And then again, I was like, "Just kidding," because we had a lot of time on our hands, and so I wrote a lot and he wrote a lot, and we sort of settled on one of the records. So we actually have, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, maybe we'll say like 100 minutes of music that the band doesn't even know yet. So I think we've got some depth there that we can dive into. But right now we're getting ready to record the follow up to it, which I don't know. I don't think that there's any reason to be secretive. The whole was a few years ago. People are always talking about like does knowing what's going to happen in a movie ruin your enjoyment of that movie? The whole spoiler thing, and I don't think it does. I'm of that camp where I'm not going to enjoy a movie by default, but or maybe I will. I don't know. I'm not a movie guy. But I think I'm of the camp that knowing what's coming next isn't going to diminish that. I guess hopefully we pull it off, but we do have another album that we've been rehearsing, and it's going to be a whopping 3 tracks this time instead of 2. So big one, real big album, and we've played 2/3 of it live over the last year and a half, and really liking what we're doing with it. We've got some interesting personnel that people new to us that are going to be on it. There's going to be a lot of the same elements, drums, singing, talking, yelling, cellos, some noise. There's going to be an interesting crew of people on it, and I'm really excited about it. I think that we retain a lot of the things that we liked about Rotten Fruit, but we're also going to maybe explore some new territory as well. Yeah, I mean, you've played them.
Yeah,
you've played all of them now.
Well, you kind of let me. I feel like since I was there as we were starting to learn it, I feel like I had a little more input on it. Yeah, and there's a song where I don't play drums
at all.
But
that is true. I think the cool thing is that when we wrote Rotten Fruit, it was basically Clark and I, the original inception, and then because we've been working on these for so long as a more cohesive unit, we've done a lot more of wouldn't it be cool if things here and there. Even just Thursday we were rehearsing, and we did a whole handful of wouldn't it be cool ifs, and changed a lot of things. So it's been maybe a much more collaborative process. Usually what happens, or in the past what had happened was, I'd write everything, I put the sheet music together, everybody shows up, they play from the score that I've provided and the parts that I've provided, and then we go from there. But I find myself coming back every week from rehearsal and going back to the score and making edits rather than just bringing the score and having it be done. I'm doing a lot of, maybe not rewriting, but a lot of minor tweaks here and there on those on the parts and everything, and it's been really cool. And I think that it's driven us to add a lot of really interesting little bits here and there.
I have to follow that up. I have to ask, who is stopping you from the constant, like, at what point do you tweak too much? Is there someone, Jordan, Clark, slapping your hand away from it, or are you able to do that yourself?
I think it's well, it harkens back to that idea of like, this is a snapshot of what we're doing at the time. You know, I think even the way that we play Rotten Fruit live, we just did a tour with the record in July, and there were a lot of similarities to how the record sounds. But we wanted to be able to play the whole thing every night. So we made some tweaks to accommodate that and make sure that like the timeline fit and that it fit with the players that we had on tour with us. And so there's no limit to that. We will continue tweaking these things based on our temperament and maybe, you know, the weather. I don't think that you know, it's just like anything else in that respect. There's always things to tinker with. But I think thinking of it as a snapshot, a recording it as a snapshot of a time and a place and a group of people is you know, part of it. I don't think that I go into the studio thinking this is the best this song is ever going to be. It's I am very antsy to record something. Let's go and record it. You know, it's time. We've done enough to it, but you know, that doesn't mean that its evolution is complete. It just means that that perhaps we're ready to start working on something new.
I like in that same realm, I don't think like all the bands that I like never stop tweaking their songs. Like even with like a very straightforward punk song that's like 3 or 4 chords, they'll play it faster live than on the recording, and that's a difference. Or they'll like change vocals up, or they'll like add a drum fill here, or like a bass run here. It's just like it. I feel like how do I say this? I feel like there's so much of us put into this song, and we are evolving creatures that the way that we play the music is going to change, and there's never going to be a final form.
Yeah, and the enough sort of enough is enough ripcord that you pull. I think it for me it boils down to having that conversation with people, like both at the local and larger levels, where it's like, you know what, we haven't been a part of the conversation for a little bit. Let's throw our hands up and say hello. And then you take that snapshot of what you're doing and how you're doing it and who you're doing it with, and put it out there. And yeah, we recorded Rotten Fruit in 2020. I think. And so it's one of those things where it's like, you know what, we've been busy and we want to, you know, show the people that we care about what we've been up to. But you know, everything's a work in progress until you die, and then you can't work on it anymore.
That's 2020. I mean, this already feels like a lifetime ago, considering the constant changing evolution of the world over the last few years. Guys, I'm going to wrap this up. We at the start talked briefly about resolutions. I'm going to twist that and turn it on its head to something else. And this is about the Head 2023. I'd love for you both to give me a realistic goal that you would like to achieve for Portal to the Goddamn Blood Dimension this year.
I would like to play out of state more.
Yeah. We talked about maybe doing a little tour in June, which I guess if we want to do, we've got to start calling people. So that's one goal. I mean, my intention is to finish this record and put it out this year. We'll see if that happens. You know, there's a lot of people, and sometimes it takes a long time to get things right. You know, and I'm never trying for perfect. I'm trying for good enough to move on. And so that's my goal. I'd love to introduce some new music. Like I said, we've got a lot of music that's, you know, we've got the 40 minutes of music that we're going to record. Another spoiler, I suppose, for the new record is that it's going to be a little longer than the last one, 3 tracks and like extra 5 or so minutes. But yeah, I want to get that recorded. I want to get that released if possible, and get on to the next song, because, you know, life can be short, and I feel like we've got a lot of songs left in us still, and I'd like to continue exploring those.
Fantastic. Awesome to hear, and simply cannot wait. If you ever feel like popping over to England this year, even if it's just for a trip rather than play, we can put you up, all of you, every single one of you. We've got a couple of families spread around. We'll put you in different houses.
I would love that. We'll see if it's in the cards. I would take some arm twisting, mostly because I hate airplanes. But
it's a long way to go. No, I get it.
That's one of the goals. Maybe that's not a this year goal, but if the right opportunity presented itself, there are so many people we've met through doing this that getting to see them in person would just be an incredible experience. I consider myself maybe a real social person, and so I want to give everybody who's ever given us the time of day that big hug that I've been thinking about giving them since they first reached out. So you'll be the first to know when we make it over. We'll see if we can make that happen one day.
Conquer America first, the world come next. There's plenty of time.
We'll see what happens.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
And thank you as well. This is like I said, it's just wonderful to hear from people that we don't get to see. I feel like we've made a lot of really new friends, and we count you as one of them now as well.
Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?